Live, and we are live. Cloud Foundry After Dark, once again. I think we're going to have more people joining, but right now we got me and Deckel, except Deckel's on mute. Say hi to the people, Deckel. You're muted. Here we go. Lots of stuff going on. Where should we start? Should we wait for people? Too late for that. All right. You can unmute at the top of the screen. You're still muted. Going once, going twice.
I heard we have a big guest today.
Oh, we have another one of us, I suppose. He's a guest. He did some work before. But before that, what else is going on? You just got back from a trip. You just did an Asian tour.
I did, it was pretty cool. A lot of interest, pretty cool customers.
What do people think about Cloud Foundry over in Asia?
Sorry?
What do people think about Cloud Foundry over in Asia?
They think it can change their, help them become much more innovative and beat the competition. It's really innovate or die there, specifically in China. It's like, okay, we got 4 months to beat the competition or we out of business. It's very simple.
China's blown up. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's, and they're also very open to talk about open source and modern like microservices stuff and 12-factor, much less IBM than we see here.
Well, if you just take the top 25% of China for talent, that's more than all of the people in the U.S.
That's the size is unbelievable. Like you look only in there. We met with a company that tries to like compete in the transportation space, and just Beijing, they're talking about like 100,000 users, just one city. Then you think about it, it's a 20 million people city. So
yeah, they have a number of cities that are over 20 million.
Yeah, that's not even the biggest city, right?
Oh no.
But no, it was really exciting. Also, banks in Singapore and Singapore, a lot of innovation going on there, and Hong Kong. Pretty exciting. I think the most exciting thing that happened to me was in the same day, I got questions on Cloud Foundry from a startup in San Francisco and a 130-year-old company in Hong Kong. So that's kind of exciting to be in a deal with technology that, 130 years, a new startup in San Francisco. That's pretty cool.
It's a crazy time to be dealing. Here's a couple things. Here's a little Cloud Foundry After Dark order of business. So anyone watching this, if you disagree with anything we say or you want to discuss it in another context, you don't want to come on the show for whatever reason, I'm happy to do Cloud Foundry in the light during the day at your convenience. Discuss any topic you'd like. I'm also encouraging, if you're in the Cloud Foundry ecosystem and you just want to get your stuff out there, we'd be happy to talk about anything you're doing, either on this show or through Cloud Foundry Twitter. Just let me know. I'll make it happen. What else is going on? Oh, here's another secret. We usually leave secrets to the end. We can either talk about this or not. But the secret is the platform is really Bosch. I said it. There you go.
That's
You snicker, but
that's the secret sauce.
That's the real platform.
So how was your week, Andrew?
Oh, well, this is another thing we could talk about, although it's going to be, we got Alex. That'll be nice.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, so my week, I spent a lot of this week working on the Cloud Foundry Summit, CFP, with Chip from the Linux Foundation, who's now part of the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and also we had help from Chris Ferris from IBM. There were over, I think, 107 proposals for 30-something slots. It's going to be a mix of customers, technical stuff, operator stuff, a couple curveballs, but it's everything from big banks to startups and people in this ecosystem telling their story. And I think this is the first Cloud Foundry Summit where there were considerably more proposals than there were slots. In the past, we definitely had good shows, but we didn't have an overwhelming response to the call for proposals. Where this time we definitely had to leave some great talks on the floor.
That's great.
So it's pretty exciting. I think it'll be definitely the best Cloud Foundry Summit ever.
May 11th, right?
Maybe not ever, but today. May 11th and 12th. It's in Santa Clara at the same convention center that lots of these conferences are. There's been Velocity conferences, OpenStack summits, all that stuff. We're trying to do better than last time. Last time we had 1,000 people, and we could maybe we should do better than that. It should be fun. There's already people buying tickets too, so register it. What's up, James? You made it.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking to the Lattice team here actually tonight, and we had a deep dive. One of our engineers, Rob, just did a stateful services on Lattice series of experiments, and so we were kind of in that. I just looked up. Did you tell everybody a little secret about the names who's coming to present at Summit? All the PCF customers who are going to be there?
I thought I would wait until that was public. Should we give them a secret at the end? I already started off with one secret, but I just said that the secret is the platform is Bosch. But the summit will be. I mean, I don't know who you want. Lockheed Martin, I think, is going to show up.
Comcast,
Kroger, Humana, Verizon, a mix of big finance, federal. There's some U.S. government stuff. Should be quite a show. Then there's it's not all our stuff either. There's a lot of speakers from the ecosystem, Cloud Credo, Altoros, Dr. Nick, the usual suspects. Those guys that we had on the other day doing Apache Brooklyn are going to give a talk about the integration with the service broker stuff with Brooklyn. What else is there? Just so much. It's 30-something talks across a number of stages, and then we also got some kind of colorful keynotes that are outside of the Cloud Foundry ecosystem, just to add context and inspiration. So it should be fun. I'm excited. I'm really actually pumped. This is definitely the most impressive summit to date.
Yeah, I think my call to action is if you're interested at all in containers and platforms and cloud native applications, this is the absolute the conference to be at for this. So looking forward to getting everyone out for it.
So we drug Alex on here, and he's muted, but let's see if we can, because they have an interesting. I think it's interesting, and it's inspired from some of the other stuff we've been doing. But if you want to build a distributed system, you probably need to test it. Maybe you want to continuously test it. So these guys have been cooking up some sauce. You want to talk about that, Alex? I don't know. It seems like he's having mic problems. 1 second. All right, new topic. What else is there? Where's Rockathon?
What's going on, Chief?
Well, we were supposed to have a special guest from Japan.
Yeah. He said he'd come on.
I sent the link in Twitter, so I don't know. He should get in.
I mean, I think the fun thing about CF After Dark is that it's pretty hard to figure out where it is or when it is. Like, it's sort of like a you got to know the password to get into the speakeasy.
But it's the same. It's the same bat time on the same bat channel, more or less. So.
Yeah, but if you're like me, you're not in the same time at the same place. This is my first time joining you guys, but last week I tried to join from the East Coast, which meant 11 at night.
That's where I'm at.
And now, oh, that's where you are? Okay. And tonight I hustled from SFO to be able to join here in Sunnyvale.
You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Matt Schutze. I work for Azul Systems. I'm the product manager and the current Cloud Foundry Summit, Cloud Foundry Foundation tracker. So I got my eyes on you boys.
Nice to meet you.
We need that. We need those.
I I don't know if you know about Azul, but we do a couple different variations of Java, both like OpenJDK, but then also another one for more mission critical workloads. So we're looking to work with a couple guys that are doing the current build pack, try to weasel our JVMs in there too. So
Yeah,
hopefully you'll see us lurking around the different JVM workloads.
I know about Azul, and then we also have the Spring guys. So there's like a lot of Java going on.
Yeah, tons of Java, tons of JVM. Throw in Scala too.
I'm not gonna say anything.
Okay, you don't have to.
No. It seems like all my early adopter friends moved past Scala at this point, but people are still excited.
Okay.
TypeSafe is a really good partner of ours. We're excited to work with the Scala community.
That's right.
So, does anyone know who Alex is, by the way? Srirachi?
Is everything working?
His mic works.
Yay!
He's our heavyweight champion.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Srirachi. I've been on Cloud Foundry for a while now, I think June 2011 or something. I've been hopping between teams. I was previously on Diego, and we had, myself and a friend had a side project going for a while called Concourse, and that's actually grown up quite a bit now. We spun up a team recently to actually properly work on it, like not on weekends.
So why don't you tell us what Concourse?
So yeah, the idea is like, sure. So like Cloud Foundry is a pretty big project. Needs a lot of interesting CI stuff. For example, you need fanning out on different architectures, lots of testing on different platforms like Windows, OS 10, Linux, just for the CLI. And in using tools to try to accomplish that throughout Cloud Foundry, a lot of people developed interesting opinions, like, well, better opinions than what the defaults for all the tooling today seems to be, because everyone just kept getting mad at tools. So we used to run like a mix of Jenkins and Travis, and most recently GoCD, but people were still mad. So we started on Concourse, and the idea is to sort of try and distill CI into simple, reusable pieces, which would make it easier to reason about and hopefully easier to scale in complexity as your project grows. The idea is like as you start on just like simple unit tests or deploying or shipping and start adding more interesting requirements, you don't have to like keep learning new things or new intricacies with how your CI works. So with that in mind, Concourse sort of shifts the focus of CI on the notion of a resource, and I can actually pull up a little demo real quick. Whoa. All right. Are we working now? So this is Concourse's own CI pipeline here, or at least part of it. So Concourse defines a resource as just a thing that you can basically version control. You can do CRUD of them. An example would be like a Git repo or a S3 bucket. And the way this is visualized is these black boxes are resources, and you can sort of see them propagating through the pipeline. Here's the Concourse resource. That's the Git repo. And you can see at the start we do these 4 different jobs. They're green indicating success, sort of standard fare there. There's red if it fails and stuff like that. And if I look at one of these jobs, the idea is it's just you can go from the main view to the console output in one click, which was a constant frustration with other things. And once you're there, it just sort of simulates the output and gets out of your way. Does all the colors and Unicode and all that stuff. But once you get past this stage, you can sort of say, this job depends on the version of Concourse that has made it past all 4 of these things. So this is an example of something that's just sort of fanning out and fanning in. Each of these jobs would run in parallel. And as a version makes it through there, it just sort of progresses through. And at the end of the day, there's a ship it, which is something that we trigger that'll actually take everything that's made it that far in the pipeline and trigger a bunch of other stuff. So there's resources, there's jobs, which are the definition of a thing to just run. Jobs are composed of like functions on the resource, so you could like get a repo and then put another repo or build a S3 artifact and put that somewhere. And one sort of interesting thing that falls out of it is all the data you can collect from your pipeline, because it's all just functions on various versions of an object. You could actually click like one of these builds and see which things fed into the last thing you shipped. There's a lot of interesting stuff we plan to do on that. For example, you might imagine having a way to bisect inputs based on like viewing their history over time and just running a job and seeing when it succeeds or fails. This is currently the ugliest page on the site, but it's the history of all the versions and which builds it affected. And so there's a few principles that this sort of builds on. One is it's fully reproducible. There's no like clicking around in the UI. There's no like build creation wizard or anything like that. It's just a declarative config file that you just push up. So that actually works very well with Bosch because you just have effectively a stateless deployment that you can just make it be the way you want it to be. And it's also stateless in the fact that none of the agents share any data between builds. Everything just runs in a container and it gets torn down when the build completes. The containers are, you can base them on a Docker image, which means you can actually just control a lot of the dependencies of your code within the code base itself. You just have like a Docker file in your unit repo or whatever. That's, I guess, a good enough start. If there's any other questions.
Yeah, Alex, I'd love to understand, like, what were some of the pain points you had in other CI systems that made you think of the problem this way, and how did you, you know, it's good to know where the pain that this came from. Like, we're not just bored, right?
Right.
Compare and contrast with other CI systems.
Sure. So Bosch has a pretty interesting pipeline in Jenkins, for example. They have to test on a lot of different infrastructures in parallel, so like vSphere, OpenStack, AWS, whatever. And they're using a Jenkins plugin for that called BuildFlow, which actually does accomplish a lot of that, but the annoyance is having to write sort of the same boring code over and over for like, how do I progress this SHA through a pipeline and things like that. And the way that's usually done in Jenkins is like you have an environment variable that you just set, propagate through the builds and stuff like that. You manually git checkout, or maybe you use some plugin. So the nice thing about this is it cuts out a lot of the repetition. Like they also have jobs that would produce some artifact and push up to S3, and they actually found that when they switched to something like this, they were able to delete just about half of their CI scripts, just because a lot of it is already a solved issue. There was also fundamental usability stuff that we constantly ran into with things like Jenkins and GoCD. It was just not very optimized for, hey, this thing is red, why is that red? And then clicking.
But in some sense, this is CI that you've optimized for complex distributed systems. Crazy? Not crazy?
Yeah. The way we've optimized it, though, is sort of by trying to take the least presumptuous set of primitives and see if that scales as the pipeline grows, rather than sort of, if you compare to GoCD, one of the things that we first run into is to configure a pipeline, you have more of a framework that you have to mold your desires into, pretty much. You have a pipeline which has jobs and tasks and things like that, and you have to just remember the nesting of the object hierarchy and which ones run in parallel, and it's just a bit too complicated for what I wanted to deal with. So one of the nice things is in Concourse, you actually just configure jobs and declare their dependencies in isolation, and the pipeline is more of a thing that sort of is a result of that. For example, there's never anything that says, hey, once you get past these 4 things, trigger that guy. Instead, this guy's isolated configuration just says, I need these 4 things, and I have these constraints applied to them. So what you're looking at here is really just a bunch of jobs and resources, and the visualization, the actual flow, is derived from that instead. So I guess one of the things is it strives to keep as much of your pipeline simple and understandable in isolation, so that you can just compose pieces of it together as you go along.
And where do you want to take this from here?
So given like one of the goals is just to be as simple as possible, I could easily see this being a thing that just sort of has the core of it be finished if we get the primitives right. So that's currently where we are. For example, you used to define jobs in terms of I have this set of input resources and this set of output resources. we've generalized that a bit more so that you can reuse things. And instead, a job just says, here's a plan of things to execute. You might have like a parallel of get and then running a task, which is like the thing that goes from green to red, and then producing a lot of stuff. But we ended up switching to that because it was just a lot more flexible and something that you'd be moving around a lot less often. And we have more plans to simplify things in the future.
So what runs in Concourse right now for CI?
What do you mean, like which projects use it, or?
Yes.
So Concourse itself, obviously. Diego just switched a few days ago. They finished. They started on a Friday and finished on a Tuesday. So I think that's one of the sort of nice things about it is I've noticed it's a lot easier for people to actually get something going in this. It's focused on a much faster feedback loop. In our initial switch to GoCD and other systems, it would often take like a month, and then still sort of just figuring out little quirks of it. There's also Garden Team. I can actually kind of show these pipelines. So this is Diego's pipeline. Theirs has a lot more stages than Concourse's. This is Gardens. It's a bit simpler. I guess the scope's just a lot smaller. And Concourse is actually fairly big, I guess, if I show everything. So we're planning on sort of rolling this out on a team-by-team basis, within Cloud Foundry at least. The next team up might be some Bosch Lite CI. But the idea is to sort of tackle each team one at a time, figure out what they actually need, and hopefully we can express that with the existing primitives, which so far has been roughly the case.
Well, so going back to James's question.
Go ahead, James.
Go ahead, Andrew. Okay, well, so I was going to say is like what I love about this on the left-hand side, you see all of these dependencies rolling up into that one single input or that one next job. Like so, like you can visually see here, like all of how many are there, Alex? Like 15 things there. When any one of 15 things, something gets promoted, then they all get tested in the right combination with the new thing, and like just having that just automatically happen when you have you don't even need a complex distributed system. You just might have different things in your app that depend on 10 other things, and you want to know when just one of those things changes, is it going to be okay? I really like the power of this.
Right.
So my question was more about the containers and how the so you said Docker, but I think it's also running under Garden, and how do you create the containers otherwise?
Oh yeah. So Concourse uses Garden solely. It uses Garden Linux's feature of being able to specify a Docker image as the base image for the build. And one of the main reasons of using Garden is to be able to support multiple platforms. For example, if I trigger this build, it'll actually run the same build across Darwin, Linux, and Windows using 3 different Garden backends. Well, one for Garden Linux, and then these 2 are pretty much dummy no-op backends. But the main value is just having that abstraction layer of being able to quickly add support for arbitrary platforms for the workers, while not having to change.
Dummy backend, Alex, you're meaning the containerization on Darwin, on OS X, and on Windows is not as mature as what it is on Linux, but it still tries to run it as best as possible in a contained way. Right.
So Linux is actually using proper containers. This is like a real Garden Linux backend. Darwin and Windows are using my no-op backend called Houdini. Windows has slight tweaks to it so that you can actually sort of guarantee that the builds clean up when they're finished. Darwin, I couldn't really find a good way to do that.
So then you have a Docker file for each project that is named for the build?
You don't have to do that. A lot of ours actually do, though, just because they do have sort of interesting dependencies. A lot of the time you can just reuse an off-the-shelf Docker file. But for example, here's the one that Concourse's own pipeline uses. And then to point at it, so this is the build config. If you're familiar with Travis, it's a lot like that. But you also declare like which platform you're running on, which image to use for the container. So this is the syntax for declaring a Docker image. You can zoom in. It also declares the required inputs. This is just to make it explicit which things are actually needed by this script here. The idea is you just declare a set of logical named inputs, and then by the time our script runs, they'll be there in the working directory because the pipeline will have satisfied them.
Nice.
Cool. And this is all available at concourse.ci, or what's the URL that people can learn more about this?
Yeah, it's at concourse.ci. We're still continuously working on docs. They should be pretty well up to date just now.
Yeah, we're just getting started, but it seems like everyone who started using Concourse really loves it so far.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Can see that.
I can do a little demo real quick.
While he's loading that up, we had a couple people join. If folks want to introduce themselves, go left to right by Alex. Charles, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
I think he's on an airplane.
Okay. Deepak?
Hi, this is Charles, on the airplane, Southwest, landing to Baltimore right now.
Nice.
That's pretty good Wi-Fi.
Isn't that great? I cannot believe it. Bill is engineer pivotal.
Thanks for coming on.
Love it.
Hi all, this is Deepak,
Deepak, hi.
and I have just started learning the open source,
This is
so
Kristen.
I thought
Wow.
of joining in. Thank you guys.
Yeah, where are you at, Deepak? And then
Japan.
Japan is in the house.
Hey, hello. So my name is Gwen. I'm now working in Pivotal, and before I was platform architect at Rakuten. So nice to meet you, everyone.
Yeah, so Gwen is a special hire for us. Excited to have him on After Dark. Rakuten, came to Cloud Foundry first summit and talked about, their pretty extensive use of Cloud Foundry. So it's great to have one of their architects from that team that use it at very high web scale right on our team in Japan now. So that's really exciting. And maybe Schaefer, you could talk to him a bit more.
When we get done with the CI demo, we'll talk about Japan.
Excellent. Just didn't want people to feel like they couldn't have an intro when they hop in.
Okay.
Alex, what have you cooked up?
So I just shipped 041 of Concourse. This is the build that pulls in everything and just builds the final release tarball of the Bosch release, and promotes that to master, ships the tarball up, and generates the next version. And if we look at this tab, there's a lot of stuff happening now using this obnoxious indicator. So now that I've shipped, this is where it's actually automating the actual delivering of all the different artifacts. This is where it'll be building the Packer box for VirtualBox and AWS. This ships a PCF tile in theory. In practice, I don't know if that actually works because we never look at that. Seems green. GitHub release. This is where we actually publish the tarballs of both Concourse and all of its dependent releases. This job just updated the docs. This is using the CF resource, which actually pushes a CF app. And a lot of other miscellaneous stuff. So it's always fun triggering that job because a lot of worker bees just start going. And that's pretty much it.
Cool.
Round of applause.
I mean, it's a great organic, we're scratching an itch kind of project. Like there was no one in management who's like, hey, let's write a CI project. But Alex, really needed to scratch an itch, and I think it's very interesting to see the kind of things that come out of those. And I've got a hunch that this will be used outside of just Cloud Foundry and Pivotal pretty broadly. So we'll see.
I've heard that some of the IBM people that have been working on the projects with us have some ideas about trying some things with it for some of the stuff they're doing.
So
Cool.
I have one question for Alex.
Yep.
I think last time I contacted you on the chat, and I want to know if you plan to add more example, because the documentation is great, but without, I mean, example is very difficult to implement. So, yes.
Yeah. So right now that's lacking. Obviously, there's stories to start rolling out a lot more fancy example stuff. We've just been too busy with other stuff, but that should be coming up soon.
Nice, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about the experience you had running Cloud Foundry in Japan. I think you guys have run Cloud Foundry at a scale most people haven't seen. So maybe talk about where you were at and lessons you learned, and then eventually you joined us at Pivotal. So maybe just a little bit of your story for everyone.
Okay, so I will start by the beginning. So I joined Rakuten like 3 years ago, mostly. And when I joined, they were starting to deploy in development the first version of Cloud Foundry. So Rakuten is the very early adopters. And so when I joined, we start to go to production and development and staging. And when I left, it was like mostly around, I don't know, for production, like 2,000 VM running on Cloud Foundry, still the V1. We are migrating to when I left, we start to migrate to the V2, actually. But most of the production like still run on the V1 based on vSpheres, VMware. So yes, and I mean my team was only 7 people managing all of that, so it was pretty fun. But I mean the first version was not like was totally different from the second one. So no containers, no build pack. So we have to implement all runtime and update all runtime. So that's mean updating all the every times. So it was pretty tough. And the second one was the monitoring, because we were doing the release management, so the monitoring, so 24 hours mostly, and of course training users, educate people, all of this stuff. But the mission we have at this time, it was to decrease the release time, increase the scalability, and to be flexible. I know that for the V1 flexible is kind of strange, but it was comparing to the other solution like 2 or 3 years ago. And so yes, so when I left, we start to move to the V2, and yeah, we choose the V2 amount like Redshift or maybe Apsela. We test Apsela too, but we decide to go to the V2. And yeah, still the OSS one. But yeah, so yeah, this is a big pictures. So if you have kind of question, but I think the most difficult part was we try to do everything by yourself, and we fork the V1, and that's why kind of big mistake at this time, forking.
Yeah, don't do that. You'll have a bad time. We have a lot of engineers on this moving things forward, right? So when you fork, you're taking a lot of responsibility on.
Yes, because you need to maintain everything by yourself mostly, especially when the V1 was mostly stopped like 2 years ago, already 2 years ago. So
I think that's a common mistake that we've seen across not just Cloud Foundry, but a lot of other cloud projects, where people who aren't super familiar with the dynamics end up on a dangling branch because they tried to add features and not push them back upstream, and then the project moves forward, and you're kind of in a position that's hard to get out of, because you don't want to give up what's a working system, but you can't take advantage of the underlying project.
Yeah, so the thing was the V1 was not enough, we can say, pluginables. So that's why for the private features, we could not fork back, push to the upstream.
No, I get it.
Yeah, that's one of the big reasons why we fork. It's just because our private needs doesn't match the public one. So yeah. This is one of the big. It's a common mistake, yes, but yeah.
So then, as you moved on to, now you're working in Japan on Pivotal's projects.
Yes.
So what do you see in that market, and what's the opportunity in Asia in general? We started out talking to Deckel, who just came back from China, but what are you seeing in Japan?
So you have to know that Japan is a very conservative country, and Japan is kind of different because they don't have, I mean, most of the development is doing outside the company. Of course, there is a big company like Rakuten, or maybe Amazon in Japan and Yahoo, but most of the other company, like the work is done outside of the development team. So yeah, it's a kind of strange.
So they depend on a lot of the SIs to do development work.
Mostly, but.
And I think that's not unique to just Japan, though, and you see that in the enterprise in the U.S. maybe to a lesser degree. But I think part of the narrative, as everything becomes more software defined, that you're seeing more people realize that that's a disadvantage. Yes, and the other thing is Japan start to be. I want to say like go back to the competitive again because. Like for example, there is so many startups in Japan, and these startups start to try new things like Docker and these kind of things. And maybe for everyone in US, like Docker seems already old, but for people in Japan, it seems very, very new, and like they are kind of afraid of these kind of things. So what we try to do is just make a lot of meetup and talk to people and explain what is the benefits, what you will gain, how this will change your. So yeah, mostly kind of DevOps things and agile, but yes, this is why we try to do, and I will try to do, of course. And yeah.
Yeah, it's early days in Japan for us. I was over there and did some interviews, and I think they're just starting to play around with containers and platforms and such. And Rakuten was sort of an extreme outlier because they had over 1,000 applications running on Cloud Foundry in one of the most conservative countries of adopting new tech. But as you can tell from Gwen, Rakuten is an English-speaking by default, very aggressive international company. So he's the rare French-Japanese person.
And French-English too.
Yeah. So
yeah, basically that's the things. But I mean, the good thing was like people was kind of very interested by this technology, and especially in Rakuten. Because they understand the wins, the JavaScript wins, like the time to market, the release time, the workflow. Like Rakuten was a very big company, and for example, to make an application production, you had to go like 10 or 20 workflow through people just to make something in production. And with the Cloud Foundry solution, I mean, like with PaaS, we gain just no workflow at all. You push your application, and your application is in production. So yes, that was the most interesting for the people at this time, like removing all workflow. And Rakuten's more of, they're like a pure web company.
Hey guys, my landing right now. Log on.
We'll lose Chuck.
Happy landings, Chuck. Thanks for joining. You're the first member to talk from a Southwest Airlines airplane.
Pioneering work there.
Cloud Foundry before landing. That's a new show.
You put the cloud into the Cloud Foundry after dark.
This is the cloud. This is the cloud right here. The cloud is right here. All right, good night, guys. I'll see you. I'll watch the rest of it tomorrow.
So yeah, if you have any questions, just ask me. You can.
The Rakuten, though, they wanted more than just web apps too. Like, so what were some of the limitations, and like, what do we need to do better? So let's not just like gloss over what the good was. Was there any things else they wanted from the platform that we didn't deliver?
Yeah, the thing was, I think for the V2, the problem was the multi-port. It can be, yeah, because they have some application, and this application, like, don't exactly remember, but I think Java application, and this is a clustering application, and this need multi-ports, so it was kind of blockers for the V2, because for the V1 it was like mostly okay because everything was open mostly, so it was kind of. But for the V2, yeah, it was kind of blockers. And like even when I push forward the V2, like the Diego support was just in beta or very new, and it's still not in production. So these kind of things, yeah.
So I have a
not really-
question
Yeah.
about the way that it changed the process and the culture. So then when you adopt technologies like Cloud Foundry, it's not just about the tech, it's also about how you use it. So I'm wondering if you could reflect on how things evolved there.
So let's just talk about, for example, we want not a real microservices architectures, but it was mostly many API architectures. There is a slight difference, and they were able to push and combine and all of this in like they reduced the release time, for example, by 90%. So that means instead of having big, not only release time, but I mean the sprint was more, how can I say, more shorter, yeah. All of these things, like, and not only pushing one big application, but you can push this API and this API at the same time, and another API, no downtime. So all of these technology things like increase the the release process, but decrease the time of the release process. Sorry.
By 90%.
Yeah, 93%, yeah, mostly. Yeah. So
were there any other sort of structural changes or process changes, or just the timing?
Well, I'm curious. He mentioned seven people running the platform.
Yeah, it was my team.
Did that change? Did you have 7 people running the previous middleware platform before?
No, before there was no middleware platform. It was just one server, one application. And so when I say the platform is, we didn't run the IS. There is a team for the IS. We just run the past platform, but not only running, but developing, of course, because as you know, we fork, so we had the features into that. So yes, it didn't really change because it was new at this time. So of course, there is still the traditional people, like, I don't know, 100 people to take care of the other servers, or maybe more. But yeah, the operation cost decreased a lot when we start to use this Cloud Foundry and IIS at the same time.
So that begs the question, at least for me, what was the team that provided middleware before? You had app servers, I assume. How did that work?
Before it was just many workflow. I mean, there is still a part of Lakota we still use the old middleware, like using Oracle things, all these still hold these things. But basically, I think it's like before you have to ask to install this software. Even Chef is still not, Chef or Puppet is still not implemented. They still install a part of the platform by hand, some software. You have a workflow, so you say, I want this PHP version, this. So of course they move a part to Chef, to provisioning things, and another part to using Cloud Foundry. So yeah, it's still very, very traditional.
So it was an infrastructure team with sysadmins and scripts or something that did the configuring?
Yeah. I mean, yes, they're still doing that for the all application, because there is so many applications, and some people are still afraid to move to the platform. So they want to have their own servers, their own things, real servers, etc., etc. So there is a team for that, sysadmin and provisioning team. We have a networking team, but for the past, it was IS team and the past team. That's all.
So what makes people afraid, you think?
I think it's just, I think it's more mentality that it's difficult to explain, but I really think that just the Japanese cultures. I really think that.
We see that in the U.S. too. I'm just curious what.
I don't think it's just Japan. If you've ever owned a working build system, and somebody comes in with something else and says use this instead, there's instant fear and you have to overcome that inertia, because you also have to do it while you're still producing what you're producing.
Yeah, but that's
You can't
difficult
stop
to
the
explain
line.
why. Yeah, it's. I mean,
Very hard.
yeah,
Very hard.
yeah. I don't know how to put a word on that. Like they're just afraid. Like because they trust the real hardware or these kind of things maybe, and they say, okay, I know this works, so I don't want to change because this works and why I need to change. Even if you explain the scalability, everything you can gain with that, they are still afraid.
I think people attach their identity to their tasks instead of thinking about what's possible or what's optimal. They define themselves in terms of their tasks, which probably goes back through history. As you know, I mean, most of the last names in a lot of countries have to do with your vocation.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's some psychological thing there.
Yeah, and I mean, in maybe it's not only Japan, but some people have their, as you say, the task. But this is really task. Like I have to do this and this and second this. There is like a form. Everything is described. Like if you want to do that, I have to do this and this and this. So they are very like formatted to do this task, and even changing is not only about changing technology, but changing his mind is more difficult than changing technology.
Interesting. So does anyone want to make any more comments about this, or should we go on to another topic? What's on anyone's mind? We're 15 minutes into Cloud Foundry After Dark. So if we get one or two little topics, we could probably close it out.
The only thing I can say is the Rakuten is moving to a platform, so the V2, of course, but they're moving to OpenStack and Chef based too, for some outside the workload.
No, I think there's a lot of tools that are interesting, and in the context of Cloud Foundry, it's very opinionated, and if you need to do something outside of some of those opinions, then there's options. But to me, it's like the 80-20 rule. It's like you're gonna get 80% of the benefit for 20% of the work from some of these things.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, everyone.
What do you think, James Bear?
Well, I think like I remember when we first heard, saw them present at Platform, and just being just impressed at the scale at which they had done it, bigger than anybody else. So yeah, I just remember way back, a couple years ago, hearing that's, that kind of scale, like even the stuff we were doing at VMware, at that time there were, to be frank, there were just a lot of Hello World apps out there. A lot of people just experimenting with the workflows and things, and to see someone actually putting their business on it and running it in production, that was really we were just really proud. It felt really cool to have like a user like that, a user story.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think there's a lot of challenges for Cloud Foundry ecosystem moving into this new paradigm where people, they can get this story, they can get this narrative. Okay, the platform's cool. The structured platform story makes sense. What do I do now? What's after Hello World? How do you get to something that works, that you're running production and everyone's really getting the benefit, like making that benefit something that's actualized instead of just hypothetical.
Yeah, and then hearing those benefits articulated in terms of like 90% or the number of people required to run a platform at that scale being fairly small. Like we heard recently from Colin Humphreys at Cloud Credo. He's written publicly before about Comic Relief and what they did in 2012 for powering Cloud Foundry across 3 different regions, 2 in Amazon and 1 in a vSphere-based data center. And they took all of those payments for Comic Relief, somewhere around 80 million pounds, in like an 8-hour period on 3 active sites, and then replicated data with Cassandra on the other side of that. And that they originally did that with 4 people that year. In the previous year, they had 50 ops people doing it in a different, more traditional way. And then this last year, he said they just finished, and they did it with 3 people this year. And it's just like, wow. They were doing blue-green deployments in production while during the time that everything, like in the middle of their day of the telethon. He was saying that one of the payment providers needed to be adjusted, and so they had the total confidence in the system that they tested it in one of their pipelines, and once they got that test through, they could just do the blue-green deployment live in production and then take one of the payment providers out of the loop that wasn't keeping up with the transaction volume. And that's to me is an amazing story, like being able to not only have a smaller number of ops people, but then having the confidence to use those blue-green deployment features, in a production site that, for them, takes all of their business in an pretty much 8-hour period for the entire year. So it's like
all or nothing. It's all or nothing.
You better get it right, Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. He also has been pretty vocal about some of the other platforms he evaluated.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, like, what was so great about Colin's story was, like, he actually tried it. That's where his confidence came from, right? Like, and not only he tried the other platforms, and at the time didn't feel they were up to the task, and then to actually do that in production, they have these, like, just like how Alex was showing us all of the concourse automation. They were using automation like that to drive Bosch, and so by practicing over and over and over again, and simulating the failures, like actually trying the live fire exercise. Okay, what happens when one of these payment providers just becomes unavailable? They practice that, and then that's how they had all these routines ready, and they just basically did what they practiced, and it just worked as it did in practice. So I thought that was a really cool story.
This is probably a bigger topic than we can get to in the next 5-10 minutes, but the operational benefit of drilling failure, like injecting failure and drilling for those eventual certainties, is a big deal. And I think it's underappreciated in the enterprise, where the mindset is we just don't touch it and we hope it never fails. And in most of what I consider the mature operational web platforms, they tend to have game days where they're purposefully injecting failure into the system, on the live running system.
Right. This past week, there was a lot of talk about this tool one of the teams had built called Chaos Lemur, which is very much like Chaos Monkey would be in Amazon. And people asking, like, hey, could we actually start doing that and shipping that as part of Cloud Foundry, just to start doing that? And we definitely have some gaps in things that we want to make better in Bosch before we fully turn on a feature like that and like a ship software that's actually doing that as part of the core platform. But I love that aspiration of trying to do that, of like actually just having the failures like Amazon does with their
one way to do that is you run it in your
Netflix,
right? You run your tests, like you don't turn the Chaos Monkey loose in production until you're pretty confident that the Chaos Monkey is not going to cause you problems. And then when it does, you don't run Chaos Monkey at night, right? Like you run Chaos Monkey during the day. Everyone's sitting there. You see what happens. If there's any incident at all, you make sure that never happens again.
Right.
So who else is we have this is like a lot of lurker to talker ratio. So if anyone has any interesting things they see or experienced in the week, then we'd love to talk about it. Or anyone at home. Or we can also go to bed and get up and get ready to do some more work. It's Monday Eve. If we don't have another topic, we can just we can go once. We gave our secret at the top of the hour. I'll just finish again by saying everyone should come to the Cloud Foundry Summit. I think it will be eye-opening for anyone who's not involved, or even the people that are involved, to see how this is progressing. Where, I mean, can you imagine getting to the point where banks are doing blue-green deployments on their live systems with confidence, based on some of the conversations we have right now? That will change industries.
Yeah, I got my did my registration for CS Summit last week. Did Chip send something to the actual list about that? think he might have. Yeah, so like Chip sent this thing out on I think March 18th about project contributors. So go check out the mailing list because from Chip Childers, there's some information if you've ever contributed to Cloud Foundry before about getting some kind of extra benefits from when you go to Summit.
So yeah, there's go ahead.
Yeah, I think there is the registration fee is provided when you have contributed these kind of things.
There's some codes, and we'll give you we'll start giving discount codes on Cloud Foundry After Dark leading up to the Summit. But yeah, definitely read. If you're reading the mailing list, then you should know what that mail says. And the Cloud Foundry Foundation wants to take care of you.
You might have to send us a pull request for some documentation or something, but that's not hard.
But definitely anyone who wants to be at the Cloud Foundry Summit. There's also diversity scholarships. There's a bunch of ways. If anyone has a problem getting Cloud Foundry Summit and they really want to, then reach out and we'll try to make sure that doesn't happen. So with that, it was kind of a nice episode. I really love the direction that we're going with Concourse. Love to see that be. I mean, I think a lot of people can get benefits in a bunch of projects across the landscape, not just Pivotal, not just Cloud Foundry. And then,
yeah, Alex, did you say how easy it was to get started? People can just basically use like a Vagrant box to do like a Vagrant up kind of thing, right? And get the single VM image going on Concourse.
Yeah, in the docs under getting started, there's a little section that says like 2 commands just to get a little local instance going. If you want to just kick the tires.
So that was concourse.ci. Go ahead and Vagrant up, kick the tires. And it's always good to hear, true battle stories from people who've been running Cloud Foundry in production. So thanks for coming and joining from Japan today.
So Alex, just one question to Alex. As I say, I already tried the Concourse CI, but I want to know if I can contact you directly because I'm not using for Cloud Foundry itself. I want to use for another project, but as I say, it's pretty difficult to understand the whole things without any examples. So maybe some YAML file, these kind of things can be helpful.
Yep.
Thank you.
If you want to contact, we're on IRC as well.
I think we work for the same company, so I can just do it.
Are you guys on Pound Count course on IRC Freenode?
Yep.
Perfect. So unless anyone has any ahas they want to shout out to the world, we'll call that Cloud Foundry After Dark, March 22nd.
Peace.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was fun.
Till next time.